Right, would you like to ask Mr. Blades to come back, please? Right, Mr. Blades, ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Blades, before the break, we were looking at the email which had come from Deborah French at CEP 3049719. Can we go back to that, please?
Yeah.
And in the third paragraph, she says, and we've read it, regarding the supply of Rainabond in the UK, she says, as you know, we supply both PE and FR core. So just pausing there, it's quite clear from that point onwards that you were very clearly aware that Rainabond supplied ACM panels with both a PE and an FR core. That must be right, mustn't it?
Yes.
And if you then look down at the, just give me a moment. Yeah, at the third line down in that paragraph, Miss French refers to supplying Rainabond only to a very small group of approved fabricators. Do you know what she meant by approved fabricators?
That would have, I'm taking that to mean companies like CEP. And I think there was something earlier where there was a few other company names mentioned. I think Sotec was one and a couple of others mentioned. They had what they classed as a small group of fabricators who weren't installers. I think that's how they viewed it.
Right. She refers to approved fabricators. What did you have to do, did you think, to be approved, as she calls it?
I believe one of the criteria was you didn't install, or you weren't the sole, or you weren't the end user of it.
As at May 2013, the date of this email, how many projects do you think you had worked on with Deborah French?
End of which year, sorry?
As at the date of this email, which is May 2013, how many projects do you think up to that date you'd worked on with Deborah French or using her products?
Not many. The one I do recall was Camden.
Yes. Right. She says that in the third line that she always works with a very small group of approved fabricators, working very closely with them on all projects. We are able to follow what type of project is being designed and then offer the right specification, including the core. Would you say that Arconic, from your experience of them prior to this email, always understands what core is being used in projects?
Yes.
And is it right that Arconic controls what core is used in ACM cladding in all projects, as she says? Is that right?
I'm not sure. I can't say that they control all cores. I don't know.
From your experience of her to that point, and she says there's a controlled supply route.
On what she's saying there, I would agree that Arconic will have a full understanding of the projects that their fabricators are working on.
Yes. I mean, she says in the first line of that paragraph that they can control and understand what core is being used in all projects. And I'm just keen to know where she says Arconic controls what core is being used, that was consistent with your experience of Rainabond and Debbie French in particular.
I wasn't aware, I don't think CEP were aware that they actually controlled what core was used. From our point of view, we would request information or prices or samples for Rainabond. We would never, CEP never requested a particular core. So in terms of whether they controlled it from their side, I can't answer that.
Right. She says later on in that paragraph, as I've read to you, that Arconic always made sure they offered the right Rainabond specification, including the core. Was that your experience? In other words, when they were putting forward a Rainabond specification, they would take into account the appropriateness of the core for the project.
I would have believed so.
Right. Where she says, in the last but one line, we are able to follow what type of project is being designed stroke developed, and then offer the right Renabon specification, including the core. On what kinds of buildings would PE continue to be offered as opposed to FR? Do you know?
I don't know.
Did you get the impression from this email that she was saying that Renabond, that is Arconic, would match the appropriate core of an ACM panel to the particular building, the subject of the project in hand?
I would agree so. I think that's the intimation of this, yes.
That's how you understood it at the time?
I would
is it?
agree this, yes.
Yes. Did you think how the type of project was likely to affect what core was offered? Let me put that in a slightly different way. What went through your mind as to what the right project for a PE core was and the right project for an FR core was?
We, CEP, never distinguished or made reference to the core with particular projects, certainly prior to Grenfell Fire.
Right.
We would request an ACM information, in this instance, we would ask information about Renabond as a sample or a price with no reference to a core.
Right. Well, when you say we, CEP, never distinguished or made reference to the core, does that tell us that in your experience of Renabond until this point, you'd never had a discussion with Debbie French about which kind of core, PE or FR, fitted what kind of project?
That's correct.
I see. Did it surprise you when she said that Arconic was able to follow what type of project was being designed and developed and then offer the right Renabond specification, including the core? Did that surprise you at the time, given that it hadn't been your experience of them?
I would like to say probably not at the time, but it does now.
Does that mean that you didn't read it carefully at the time sufficiently for it to surprise you?
Probably, yes,
Okay.
I agree with that.
Now, by right specification, given the context of this email, which is a cladding fire in the UAE regarding ACM or involving ACM, what did you understand it to mean by right specification, the right Renabond specification in that last line?
I would believe that Debbie French would be referring to the specification that was used on the building in the UAE, in terms of whatever material was specified there.
Yes. In other words, safe in relation to the fire risks posed by the building.
Yes.
Yes. Was it your experience with Alcoa and Renabond in particular that they worked closely with CEP to know what you were making and for what project?
Yes.
And that included Grenfell Tower?
Yes, they was aware of the projects that we worked on.
Yes. Does that mean that she knew, once cassette had been selected, later in the story, and we'll come to it, that PE ACM panels were going on to Grenfell Tower?
Yes.
And she knew that the building, so far as you recall it, was above 18 metres in height?
Correct.
Did you take any steps in the light of the email to make sure that the right technical specification, including the core, thereafter was offered on each project by Renabond?
I personally didn't know.
Did anybody at CEP?
Not that I'm aware of.
What did Debbie French do in that respect? Do you know?
I don't know.
Did you having got this email, did you raise the potential dangers of using ACM PE with anybody on the Grenfell project?
No.
So you didn't raise it, for example, with Studio E?
No.
Why is that?
I wasn't aware that Studio E was going to be used in Renabond on the project at that time.
Well, we've seen from the discussions in late 2012 and certainly February and March 2013 February and March 2013, that you were discussing or proposing Rainer-Bond ACM panels with a PE core for use on the building as the cladding rain screen material. Having done all that, having had those discussions and introduced Debbie French into the story, why didn't you, having got this email, go to Studio E and say, look, there's been a fire in the UAE. We've been talking about ACM panels for Grenfell. We need to be very careful that we get the right core for the building. Why didn't you do that?
I can't answer that.
Do you think you should have done?
In hindsight, yes.
Yes. Can you explain how, if Debbie French was able to control, as she says, what ACM products went on to Grenfell Tower ended up with an ACM PE core and not an FR core?
I don't know. Can't answer
Right. Did you think that it was any part of your job to make sure, whatever Debbie French was doing, that you made sure that Studio E and others involved in the project at the buying end made sure they knew that at least the difference in terms of fire performance between PE and FR core?
that. Can you just repeat that?
Yes, it was a long question. Let me try and shorten it. Having got this email, did you not think that it was part of your job? Well, let me put it neutrally. Did you think it was part of your job to alert Studio E or Ryden or Harley, whoever you were dealing with, to the differences between PE and FR core?
I don't believe I did, no. Personally.
And why was that?
No particular reason.
And again, do you think you should have done?
In hindsight, possibly yes.
Were you aware of a fire at Knowsley Heights in 1991, an exterior fire?
I am aware of it, but it was prior to me joining CEP.
It was. When did you first learn about the fire?
I couldn't tell, I can't recall. It's something I just had heard or became aware of.
Right, before 2012?
Probably, yes.
Yes. What about the fire at Lacknell House in London in 2009? Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I was aware of it, but again, I don't particularly recall it.
Were you aware of a fire at the Mermoz Tower in Roubaix in France in 2012?
No.
An exterior fire. What about the Lacrosse building in Melbourne in 2014?
No.
What about the Address in Dubai, 2015?
No.
The Torch, Dubai, 2015?
No.
No. Did you ever do any investigation yourself into the history of exterior cladding fires,
No.
either in the UK or globally?
No.
Okay. Can we then turn to a totally different topic, which is quotations in December 2013 and then into January 2014, so moving the story on. I think it's right, isn't it, that CEP became involved in the Grenfell Tower refurbishment in December, again, I think there having been a gap, in December 2013.
Yes.
And we left off the story, I think, in April 2013. We pick it up in December of that year. Do you remember that?
I do remember 13.
Yeah.
December 13.
Now, if we look at CEP 6060267, this is an email from you to Mike Albiston of Harley, dated the 20th of December 2013. And I'm sorry, what's gone onto the page is at the end of the email run. I should show you page 3 first, which starts at the foot of page 3. And here is an email from you to Mike Albiston of Harley on that date, 20th of December 2013. Morning, Mike. Following my telephone conversation with Mark Harris yesterday, could you please forward your window and curtain wall schedule? With regards to the rain screen overcladding, we are to offer our system based on a cassette tray and face-fixed ACM, i.e. Rainer-Bond. To this, could you please forward elevation drawings and any other information you feel is relevant? Now, you say this was further to your telephone conversation with Mark Harris yesterday. That would be the 19th of December.
Correct.
Do you remember that conversation?
In bits, yes.
What do you remember of it? Can you tell us?
I'm assuming that I'd spoke to the architects or somebody, and they'd informed me that the job was out to tender, the project was out to tender. In amongst phone call, I contacted Hawley's, spoke to Mark Harris. He advised me that, I think he at the time that they had the documents. They'd been talking to Studio E in the past about the project and about the products, and that Renabon was within the documents, and could we provide a price for that, and with an option of rain screen with cassettes and face-fixed panels.
Right. So you rang Mark Harris.
Correct.
What prompted you to do that?
Because it's the type of work, Grenfell Tower is a type of work that Harleys would engage themselves in. So
Yes.
it was a case of ringing him to find out if he was involved, if they were involved in, as it's a type of work that they work on.
Yes.
And it's in London, so it's in their area.
We'd seen that you'd had previous discussions with Studio E earlier in the year, and then there'd been a long gap. So my question is, what after that gap had prompted you to pick up the telephone at all to anybody on the project?
I may have rung them during the course of the year, and the response could have been that at the moment in time we're still investigating options, or
Right.
we haven't finalised any details. Give me a call in 3 months' time, 2 months' time,
Right.
and that type of thing.
Was it your habit or practice to, as it were, keep tabs on potential subcontractors such as Harley, because they offered a business opportunity for you?
Occasionally, yes. We won't particularly keep tabs on them. We'd more keep tabs on a project itself to find out where that was at.
Understand.
Than the subcontractor themselves.
Yes, I see. So does it come to this? You were involved earlier in the project talking to Studio E. You knew Harley were a potential subcontractor. You'd had, from time to time, discussions with them about the project, and this was another
I'd not
time.
spoke to Harleys about this project till December 13.
Right, so was this the first contact you'd had with
Yes.
Harley about Grenfell?
About Grenfell, yes.
Right.
Correct.
And you say in the email, we are to offer our system based on a cassette tray and face-fixed ACM, i.e. Renabond.
Mm-hmm.
Did Mark Harris ask you to quote specifically on that basis?
I can't confirm that specifically, but as I've mentioned it in the email here to Mike Alberston, I would propose that was raised by Mark Harris. I wouldn't have had sight of the document, so I wouldn't know what the documents consisted of.
So I think you're agreeing that the email rather suggests that Mark Harris asked you to quote specifically on that basis.
Yes.
Yes. Do you remember whether Mr. Harris asked you to quote on the basis of any other product such as the Leucobond?
No.
So only Renabond?
Yes.
I see. Did you ask him how or why he was interested in only having Renabond and no other product?
Other than the fact he probably mentioned that it was in the documents.
Right.
And yeah.
Now let's move to January 2014. Can we go to CEP 60205, please? And we can see that here is an email at the top which responds, at least in email terms, to your email of the 20th of December we've just been looking at. And it comes back to you from Mike Elberston, 6th of January, with some attachments, including the last attachment, NBS spec H92 rain screen cladding. Do you see that?
Yes.
So that's the H92 part of the NBS specification dealing with rain screen. And hi, Geof, it says, further to our telephone conversation this morning, please find attached schedules and NBS specifications for the curtain wall and windows. I have also included the NBS specification for the rain screen and the elevation drawings. I will send you a link for further drawings in Dropbox. And if we go to the attachment, the NBS specification H92, it's at CEP 60215, please. 60215. When you got this from Mr. Alberston on that day, did you look at that?
Yes.
If you go, please, to page 2 of this document, the specification there, under types of rain screen, you can see is KME architectural Solutions, and the product reference is Proteus HR honeycomb rain screen panel. You see that?
Yes.
And that's a zinc cladding with an aluminium core and a honeycomb pattern, isn't it?
I believe so. As I said earlier, I've never worked with it, so I'm not aware.
And if you turn back a page, you can see that there is a reference to some comparison quotations or comparative supply and installed costs. There you see Reno Bond, Duragloss 5000, metallic standard and non-standard, satin gloss, chameleon, anodized look, satin gloss, and a Luco Bond, Spectra Secura 917, and then zinc, quartz zinc, composite polymer paddle by VM Zinc. Note, face fastened solutions permitted. Now, what did you understand by quartz zinc composite polymer panel by VM Zinc to be?
I would have taken that to be the zinc that was discussed way back in, is it October 12?
Right. So, is that the ZCM supplied by Arconic?
Yes, I would believe it was by
Right.
them.
Not another manufacturer.
It could have been.
I see. According to Debbie French, she says that that was ZCM manufactured by RCM. So that was your understanding of that was it?
It was a product that we didn't associate with.
Yes. And then clause 11 higher up, it says Renabond Duragloss 5000 metallic standard and non-standard satin gloss. What was standard a reference to, did you think, when you saw that?
The standard would have been their standard colours.
Right. So not a reference to PE core.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. Just picking up the reference to face-fast solutions now, what did you understand by that? The name face-fast solutions.
That would be to me, that would be a reference to rivet fixed flat panels.
Right. And it says permitted. Permitted as opposed to what?
How do you mean?
Well, it says face-fastened solutions permitted. Did you think when you saw this that you were to quote for cassette, but that face-fastened solutions were also
I would
permitted?
take it like, yeah, they would accept a face fixed panel.
I see. And looking at the different range screen products listed there, did you ask Harley why they weren't asking you to quote for any product other than Renabond ACM PE panels?
No.
Then if we go to page 5 of this document, still part of the NBS specification, we could see paragraph 220, specification, compliance standards, the Centre for Window and Cladding Technology, CWCT, standard for systemized building envelopes. Did you read that at the time and note it?
Not in great depth, no.
Were you familiar with the CWTC standard, Mr.
No.
Blades? You weren't. In your experience as a cladding fabricator, is the CWCT standard commonly specified in specifications?
It does occur quite frequently in a specification. Yeah.
Had you come across it before?
I'd seen that paragraph before, yes.
But you hadn't explored what CWCT standard actually contained?
No.
Had you ever read it?
No,
Right. Have you read it to this day?
no.
Is there a reason why CEP is a manufacturer of or fabricator of cladding panels? Is there a reason why you were not familiar with that standard?
My understanding, it was more for companies that did a supply and fix, a total contract supply, as opposed to a manufacture of a panel or of a
Right.
a panel in a rail system.
Right. Was anybody else within CEP, do you know, familiar or had a working knowledge of what the CWTC standard contained?
I'm not sure, I couldn't answer that.
Right. What did you understand was the intended purpose of including the reference to the CWCT standard in this specification?
I wasn't sure.
Did you ask anybody?
No.
Why is that?
I left those type of questions to designers who would have a better knowledge of what that referred to than myself.
Right. Did you, in your mind, make any connection between the specification compliance standards CWCT standard for system-iron building envelopes here and the list of alternative rain screen cladding products on pages 1 and 2 of this document?
No, I didn't.
You didn't. Were you aware, in general terms, I know you say you weren't familiar with the standard, but were you aware that the CWCT standard for systemized building envelopes contained guidance that said that the building envelope shall not be composed of materials which readily support combustion, add significantly to the fire load, and or give off toxic fumes?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't. You weren't aware of that?
No.
Aware of that? No. Okay. Were you aware that it said that when one of the cladding elements is a composite of 2 or more materials, the element as a whole must demonstrate the appropriate fire performance?
No, I wasn't.
So do we take it that, at least so far as CEP's involvement was concerned, and that involvement extending to discussions about the appropriateness of Rainabond ACM for the building, did you take any action to ensure that the 2 standards I've just referred you to were adhered to or in any way?
No. We would have left that to the designing subcontractors.
Was it not important for you to know what standards your client had to meet so that you could provide a suitable product or suitable finished product for applying to the building?
Can you just rephrase that one, please?
Was it not important for you to know what standards your end users had to meet? Because this is an NBS specification.
Probably would have been in hindsight now.
Right. I see. So you accept that you should have done, but didn't at the time.
Yes.
Yes. Do we take it from your answers earlier on the Debbie French email of the 13th of May and looking at the NBS specification and putting the 2 together, that even though you saw the 13th of May email about the fires in the UAE, you didn't change your approach and make sure that your products, when used on buildings in excess of 18 metres, would comply with the CWCT guidance?
I didn't personally know.
No. And why is that?
It would have been beyond my knowledge of those technical points, and I would have had to refer those back to a technical designer or somebody with more knowledge of those documents than myself.
Can I then turn to the subject of insulation? Now, if we stick with the NBS specification document and go on in it to page 10, you can see there that we have at the top of the page, paragraph 776, under the heading Thermal Insulation, and in the second bullet point down, manufacturer Celotex Limited, and just a bit below that, you can see product reference FR5000 aluminium foil face both sides. And 3 lines down below that, that's where we find the required performance. Now, did you read this part at the time? This part of the NBS spec?
Probably not.
Why is that?
We've never used CEP, would never use a product like Celotex. We've always used mineral wool,
Right.
Geoslab rock wool, Geoslab Knauf.
Can you just explain why that is?
From what our design engineer tells us, that is of non-combustible, and that's all he would ever put in. If it was a CEP project,
Yes.
we would always use a mineral wool.
You always use them.
Always use a CEP project. Always use mineral wool.
When you say a CEP project, you mean one which was a bespoke package?
That if the design element was by CEP.
And why is that? Can you explain?
Because it was, I was told and led to believe, and that was the reason that Mark Hayward Associates, it was non-combustible, and he wouldn't, or they as a company, he would never sign anything off other than that.
Right.
From a CEP point of view.
Given that, as you say, it sounds like a golden rule that CEP, when designing the full package, would never use a product like this Celotex product. Can you explain why you didn't spot its presence here in the NBS specification?
I probably skipped over it, to be honest, on that
Right.
side, because my quotation, which no doubt will go on soon, qualifies that we have used mineral wool.
Would it not have stuck out like a sore thumb to you?
I wasn't aware of Celotex, to be honest. I wasn't aware of the company name, albeit that I can read now and understand what that product is.
Yes.
But we would never have quoted that, even it's in the documents.
Had you spotted that this was a rigid polyisocyanuric insulation board being proposed within the NBS spec, together with a Rainobond as an alternative? If you'd spotted it, what would you have done?
Well, as we was quoting another company, a subcontractor, I would take it that the architect and all other people who's been involved in the design and putting together the specification, they would have knowledge of this product and they would deem it to be acceptable. As I said, CEP wouldn't use that as a product.
Going back a little bit to an answer earlier on about Mark Hayward would only ever use a non-combustible insulation. Can you explain why that is, and in particular why that is the case where it's being used with, for example, an ACM rain screen?
I can't answer why Mark Hayward Associates always used a mineral wool, but that is all that he's ever used, as far as I'm aware, on all CEP projects.
Right. Do you know why that is?
Because he believes it is a non-combustible, which is a product that he will work with.
Right. Was it something? I don't want to put a thought into your mind, but I'm going to try and prompt it if I can. Was there something in his concerns that you knew about mixing a PIR insulation product with a rain screen panel comprising
I don't believe so.
CM? You don't.
I think it was there, as Mark Hayward Associates, as a business, they had a view that they would only use mineral wool insulation.
Right. Were you aware of the difference in terms of fire performance between PIR, which is what this Celotex product is, or was, and mineral wool at the time you received this specification?
No.
Were you aware, at least in general terms, of the role that combustible insulation can have in an exterior fire?
Not really, no.
Did you, having seen the NBS specification, and I take your point that you didn't read it all, did you have a discussion with Deborah French about the appropriateness of using PIR as the insulation material together with the rain screen ACM that she was
I don't recall I did, no.
proposing? Right. Did you ever have a discussion at all with Studio E or Harley or Ryden
No,
about the insulation?
no.
Can we then go to CEP 60244, please? This is an email chain between you and Deborah French in early January 2014, and this is now on the 7th of January 2014. If we go to the bottom of page 1, we can see you go to Deborah French on that day. So this is the day after you get the NBS spec. And you say, "Hi Debs, please see the attached rain screen spec, ref the above. could you please advise rates for Rainer Bond accordingly? See that?
Yes.
And then you end the email, and we need to turn to page 2 for that. Catch up with you these next couple of weeks. Would you normally send a manufacturer an NBS specification for a particular project?
Not normally, but in this instance, because we was asking for, well, we're sending the specification over to her with the various colour options. We send it there for her reference. Probably more for prices for the colours, the chameleon and the other colours that was referenced in there.
Right. Why do you think she needed to see the full NBS specification that you'd been sent by Mike Alberston the day before, in order simply to quote rates for Rainer Bond that you'd asked her for?
I don't recall. It could have been simply just to forward that part of the documentation we received from Harley's, than try and separate out pages.
Yes, I can see that it would have been convenient, but why did you send her the whole thing as opposed simply to separating it out and saying, well, could you please quote for these particular Rainer Bond products?
I don't recall. As I say, it was probably simply just to send that than try and separate out pages out.
Right. Did you expect her to advise you about whether, or tell you, about whether the Rainer Bond products listed in the NBS specification were appropriate for the Grenfell Tower project?
I didn't send that with that purpose in mind.
No, but did you have an expectation that if there was something inappropriate or wrong, she would tell you?
I would have thought so, but it wasn't, as I say, it wasn't in my mind to do that. That wasn't the purpose. If they'd have spotted something that they had a concern about, then I would expect them to flag it up. But as I say, it wasn't the purpose of sending that document across in its fullness.
Right. Given the email that you'd received from Debbie French on the 13th of May 2013 about controlling the supply, why didn't you expect her to tell you if she'd seen something wrong with the specification or something that didn't fit?
I probably didn't link those two, the email I sent and the email that we received in May 13.
You didn't put the two and two together?
I didn't put the two and two together.
Right. Did you and she speak after you sent the specification to her, do you think?
I can't recall.
Let's scroll up to the top email in the chain. This is hers to you of the 15th of January 2014. And she says here that she's confirming the exceptionally good rates I quoted you for Grenfell Towers, ! And then she sets out some specifications, and then underneath that, a price, £28 per square metre. Was there a discussion about these rates between you and her before she sent you this email?
No.
Because she says, just to confirm, it looks from that as if there was an earlier discussion, but she's now confirming.
If there was, I don't recall it.
All right. Now, she's quoting £28 per square metre, which she describes as exceptionally good. Was it? Was it exceptionally good at that price?
I can't recall what the rates were for any other project, to be honest.
Now, we've seen in your January email, and it's short, we can go back to it if you need to, but we can tell that you didn't specify what sort of core you wanted for the ACM, FR or PE, and nor did the specification that you sent her. When she came back to you on the 15th of January, as we see here, she didn't specify whether she was quoting PE or FR either, did she?
I believe not, no.
What did you understand she was quoting for, PE or FR?
I would have understood that that would be the standard Renabond product that had been used in the past by CEP and other companies, and looking at it now, that would have been the PE core.
Right. So you refer to the PE as the standard Renabond product used in the past by CEP?
As I said earlier, we would ask for Renabond as a product for samples and price. The core was never discussed.
I see. So am I right then? Well, let me ask you if your comment on this. Was it the case that in your understanding at this time, early 2014, if someone asked for ACM, that would be PE core ACM?
Yes, correct.
Now, we see £28 per square metre. Is that not rather higher than you would usually pay for Rainabond?
I don't know. We got prices per project and varying colours.
Right. Can I just suggest to you that in fact you would normally pay £4 or £5 less than £28 per square metre?
Okay.
Yes, you'd accept that?
I couldn't tell you.
Well, let's have a look at what Debbie French says. It's MET 53162. And I'd like to go to page 22. This is her witness statement of the 4th of November 2019. And at page 22, paragraph 76, she says that she sees that she did provide a quote of 28 square metres for Rainabond. She says, I cannot recall the exact details of how I calculated this quotation. However, this was a relatively high price for Rainabond, and CEP would have known this because of their involvement in the market and the fact that they purchased Rainabond on previous occasions. From the best of my memory, I included a price at this level because I was aware that there was to be some form of discussion or negotiation between CEP, Harley and the project managers, and I make reference in the email to the price being a good starting point. I do not remember any discussions about price at the time. So is it right that did you understand Deborah French to be quoting £28 per square metre, expecting to be knocked down a bit?
From this, I would say yes.
Well, this is what she intended. What was your understanding?
In the natural course of projects like these, the client, the contractor, down the supply chain, they always want a little bit off somewhere along the way.
Let's go back to the email then, which is at the top of CEP 60244. She says, hope this is okay to start the bidding with Harley's. I am sure you or Neil will be back on the phone if you need any other details, straight reductions. And then there's whatever the opposite of a smiley face is.
Yeah.
Does that not, or did that not suggest to you at the time that she might be expected to be knocked down further on the price?
Yes, it would sound that she was expecting that there would be a request for a keener price throughout the supply chain. She was probably preempting what was going to happen.
Given that by this stage you knew that FR was available as a core, and given the warning that Debbie French had given about FR as opposed to PE and controlling the supply route carefully, can you explain why you didn't seek a quotation for the FR core ACM, given that you knew that it was going to go onto a building over 18 metres in height?
CEP were never asked for an FR core, and to the best of the knowledge we understood, that the Class O Renabon met the building regulations. And
is that why you didn't seek a quote for the FR core?
I would say so, yes.
Did you seek any quotations from any other manufacturers, for example, Alucobond, at this
No.
stage? And is that for the same reason I asked you before?
Yes.
Essentially, you said politeness, I said loyalty.
Correct.
We may agree or disagree about that, but the same rationale.
Same rat. Yep. Yep.
Now, if we go to CEP 60267, please. Sorry, 268, please. 268. This is an attachment that you sent to Mike Albiston on the 21st of January, containing the CEP quote. And this one is for Metal Tech system, thermally broken aluminium profile windows, and the rain screen overcladding. There's another one, I think you remember, which had a quotation for Wicona windows, but the same cladding quotation.
Correct.
You sent him two quotations on that
Correct.
day. Just for our record references, that one is at CEP 60270. But this one, 268, it says, in terms of rain screen halfway down, rain screen overcladding panels are to be manufactured utilising 4mm Reynobond ACM. And it says are to be manufactured. Does that reflect the fact that you were asked specifically by Mike Albiston to quote for panels using 4mm Reynobond ACM?
That sentence is a standard sentence within a quotation that CEP would send out.
I see.
It could have been panels maybe manufactured utilising.
Yes.
It could have been manufactured utilising Steny, for instance, but the wording would have been, it was a fairly standard sentence.
I see. So are to be doesn't reflect a specific request from the...
No.
No. And to be fair to you, in fact, the quotation that you supplied to Mohit Kotecha in February 2013 contained the same wording.
Mm-hmm.
Following these quotations in 2014, I'm so sorry, let me go back just and ask one or two questions. Now, we saw in the H92 specification that CEP should have quoted for Proteus HR honeycomb. Is the reason why CEP didn't provide a quotation for that CEP simply didn't fabricate?
We never used a company.
No.
Yeah.
And why not a quotation for a Leucobond or quartz zinc?
The Leucobond, I think we've covered.
Right.
And we don't do zinc.
Turning to later in 2014, do you remember that cladding samples were sent for the Grenfell Tower project?
Sorry, which month?
2004, later in 2014, the summer of 2014.
Yes, there were some requested.
Yes. And normally, am I right that samples are normally provided as a small flat sheet, which consists of a sample of the composite panel?
Yes.
So you get the aluminium sheet and then the core in the middle?
Yes.
As a square?
Postcard side normally.
Right. Okay. Well, let's see if we can get a picture. SEA 30s14456, please. This is a photograph of one of the samples which was sent to Studio E.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Now, we can see here that it actually says this sample has an FR core. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
And given that you hadn't been asked to quote for FR, why were you sending a sample of FR called ACM?
I'm not aware that came directly via CEP.
I see. I see. Let's see what you did see. You were copied in on a number of emails arranging for the delivery of samples, weren't you? Not all of them, but some of them. Let's have a look at one. CEP 60275. And the second email down on that page is an email from Deborah French to Mark Harris, 19th of March. Hi Mark, good news ref Grenfell Towers. In terms of samples and colour options, I will arrange to send the following. And then she sets out a number of colours. And then after the second set of products, she says, Gwen, could you please arrange to have the above samples forwarded by A6 sent out to Mark Harris at Harley Curtain Wall ASAP? And then you're copied in on that. Hi, Geof. This is on the 20th of March at the top of the page. FYI, email and samples we are sending over to Mark at Harley Curtain Wall, re Grenfell, Debs. Did you see the samples that were sent?
No.
Right. Were there any telephone conversations you had with Arconic about sending samples to Harley?
No.
In any of the exchanges that you had about samples, do you remember any discussions about what the core of the ACM would be, FR or PE?
No.
Have you do you understand or know why the picture of the sample I showed you earlier was a picture of a sample panel with an FR core.
No.
Can we then turn to the mock-up in June 2014? Do you remember CEP was asked in June 2014 to make a mock-up of the facade?
Provide samples for the mock-up, yes.
To provide samples, right. Now let's go first to CEP 30/51814. This is an email of the 25th of June 2014 from Sam Anketell-Jones. He's Dan Anketell-Jones' brother. To you, attachments, latest Grenfell drawing, 25th June 2014. Hi, Geof, it says. The attached PDF shows the whole mock-up. This should clear some things up for you. Do you remember what it was that needed clearing up, which you'd asked him to clear up?
I don't know. Maybe it was the measurements of some panels or the colour reference. I don't
Right.
know.
It appears from this you had asked for the whole mock-up. Do you remember why that was?
We were asked to provide panels for the mock-up for Harley's, or Harley's asked for a mock-up to be made, and we were asked to supply the panels.
Right. Let's go to the document. We need the offline reference, please, and it's CEP 30/51815. Do you recognise this as the drawing that was sent by Sam Anketell-Jones to you?
I recognise a drawing. I can't say it was Sam that sent it me, but I believe that will be the case then.
We can see at the bottom of the page that it was created by Harley on the 10th of June 2014. If we just go to the very bottom, drawn by SAJ,
Yeah.
Sam Anketell-Jones. And if we go to the top right-hand corner, we can see it says, for viewing purposes only, no insulation on mock-up. You see that?
Yes,
Did you see that? Did you spot that?
I would have done, yes.
Yeah. Did you investigate what the insulation was going to be?
No, from that point, they didn't require insulation on the mock-up.
You say from that point?
It was just they were looking to provide just the panels,
Right.
no insulation.
Oh, I see. So the mock-up didn't actually have the insulation on it, just the panels.
I believe not. Yeah.
Now, if we look at the drawing, we can see that there are, I think, 3 different finishes: champagne metallic, smoke silver metallic, and natural aluminium brushed. And is it right? All of those are Rainer Bond ACM PE core.
As far as I'm aware, they are, yes.
Yeah. Is it usual for only one type of cladding to be considered at a mock-up? Or was it usual?
It's usual once they've got to a point where that's what the client and design team and subcontractors are looking at.
Now, these are all face-fixed, aren't they? Rainer Bond ACM.
They appear from the drawing. Whether they were on the mock-up, I couldn't tell you.
Yes. And the note says that the drawing represents a temporary mock-up structure to show panel positions and colours for visual purposes only. Do you know why only the face-fixed panels were shown in the mock-up and no cassette?
I don't know.
Because we can see that no cassette fix was supplied for the mock-up. Do you know why one wasn't?
I don't.
Were you aware that at this stage, the planners and indeed Studio E were leaning heavily towards a cassette fix?
No.
Did you get any sense from your dealings with Harley or Studio E or Ryden at this time, so far as you had any,
No.
that there was a I wouldn't say dispute, but perhaps a difference of view as to whether face-fixed or cassette should be used?
No, I wasn't aware of anything that went on.
Did you wonder why you weren't asked to provide a cassette
For the mock-up,
for the mock-up?
not particularly. As my understanding and CEP's understanding of it, it was to show the colours more than... So it, I personally never asked a question. I don't think anyone else did.
Right. Because, of course, if it's just for the appearance, it still makes a difference whether it's cassette or face-fixed. So I just wondered whether it had gone through your mind to
No,
ask
it hadn't.
why it wasn't that a cassette mock-up wasn't also required.
No.
Now, in terms of what was supplied for the physical mock-up, we know that Arconic sent smoke silver and metallic champagne, both with a PE core. Do you remember that?
I remember the samples coming in.
Yes. And then if we go to ARC 7098, we can see the email chain about the cladding for the mock-up. And I'd like to go into that email with you, please, to the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2. The bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2. This is an email from Deborah French of Thursday, the 22nd of May, 2014, to Gwenfell Tower. Copy to you. Do you see that? Hi,
Yes.
Gwen. And then if we go to the top of page 2, she says, we spoke this afternoon about natural brushed aluminium panels, H9103S we have at the factory. Could we please send as FOC mock-up material for project Grenfell Towers to CEP facades? And then she gives the measurements. Many thanks, Debs. So you could see from this email that you were going to be getting that product for part of the mock-up. And if we go to the top of page 1, we can see that Ms. Derendinger responds the next day, the 23rd of May. Dear Debbie, and you're copied in on this as well, Mr. Blades. Dear Debbie, as spoken yesterday on the phone, we have some Raynor-Bond FR sheets on stock in 4 by 1500 millimeter times different lengths, including length below required 2,270 millimeters that we could use for this mock-up. So we see her offering FR core ACM for the mock-up. Did you accept that offer?
I can't recall whether we took those panels or whether we took the original ones.
Did it occur to you as odd or unusual, perhaps, that you were being offered Raynor-Bond 55 FR sheets for the mock-up?
The way I would have read that at the time, there was maybe those panels were quicker to dispatch than the other requirements.
You could see from this, could you see from this, that at least so far as Alcoa was concerned, Deborah French and Gwenfell Tower, they saw the Raynor-Bond 55 FR sheets as interchangeable with PE sheets, at least so far as the mock-up was concerned.
I agree, yes.
Did you think to explore with them whether, in fact, given that Grenfell Tower was a building in excess of 18 metres, you should actually be suggesting FR core to the client?
I didn't, and I don't believe CEP did. And at this stage of the project, we were just working to other people's requirements.
Yes. It's right, I think, that you were actually then sent an ACM panel for the mock-up with an FR core, weren't you?
I can't remember.
Well, let's have a look. ARC 50s103. ARC 50s103. This is an order acknowledgement dated the 10th of June 2014. So the same date as the drawing that we saw earlier with the mock-ups on it. And we can see from this order acknowledgement that the natural brushed aluminium was supplied with an FR core. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
Yes. And it was dispatched, I think, on the 6th of June 2014. Delivery conditions, DAP St Helens. And the delivery address at the bottom is CEP Architectural Facade in St Helens. You see that?
Yes.
And the product, a Raynor-Bond 55 natural aluminium H103S wash coat, and then reverse side coating FR. You see that?
Yes.
So it looks on the face of this document that an FR panel was supplied for the mock-up?
Yes, I will agree with what's in front.
Yes, and that it went to a CEP architectural facade,
Yes,
and in the box at the bottom it says, mock-up for Grenfell Tower project to the attention of Geof Blades, that's you.
yes.
So you would have received, looking at this document, is this right, an FR Reynobond 55 panel?
That that panel would have come into the factory. I wouldn't necessarily have seen the panel because at that stage, all in CEP were aware that the panel was coming in to be shipped back out for a mock-up. So it was a case that the panel was coming to us. I guess from this that we had to do some work, cut it to a size, maybe just drill some holes. It was coming into us to ship down to Harley. The fact that it's for my attention was probably a point of contact through the emails. I may or may not. I don't recall particularly seeing the panel. It would have come into the factory onto the shop floor. You know, I would have no particular reason to go and inspect the panel itself per se.
Would you not, given that you were involved closely in the arrangements for the mock-up?
It was a name on a delivery address that came into the factory. It could have been any one name. It could have. It wouldn't have to be my name. It could have just been the company address, and the panel would have arrived on the shop floor. And following the information that Sam Anketel-Jones had passed, the panel would be shipped out in accordance with that. So I don't recall seeing the panel. I was probably aware that it had come in, so I could advise, or somebody in CEP could advise Hollies that the panel had come in and it was going out.
Were you not? Well, it says on the document, mock-up for Grenfell Tower project to the attention of Geof Blades. And my question is, given that it was for your specific attention, why would you not have gone to see it, made sure it was the right thing, and made sure that what was going out to Harley for their mock-up was appropriate? I
would have. Maybe I went down and looked to make sure it was the right colour.
Do you remember?
I don't know. I don't recall, no.
I mean, on the face of the documents we've seen so far, it does very much suggest that you were, at least by this time, June 2014, aware that Reynobond 55 came in an FR and was suitable, at least for the purposes of the mock-up, for use at Grenfell. And I've got to put it to you, was this not something of a missed opportunity?
In hindsight, yes.
Yeah. Now, were you at the mock-up? The actual viewing of the mock-up?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't. Was anybody from our CONIC, to your knowledge?
I can't tell you who was there.
Was anybody else from CEP there?
Not that I'm aware of,
Right.
no.
Now, CEP, I think, didn't charge for the fabrication of the mock-up, did it?
Correct.
And can we go to CEP 504296, please? This is an email chain in June 2014, and if we go to the second email in the chain, it's from Mark Harris to you on the 17th of June 2014. And if we look at the fourth paragraph down, it says, Ryden are looking, this is about the mock-up, Ryden are looking to Harley and its supply chain to provide the mock-up free of charge. Certainly Alcoa have stepped up to the plate and agreed that the material will be free of charge. From Harley's end, we will provide the mock-up design and installation free of charge, and we'll look to your good selves as our supply chain partner, fabrication and delivery of the panels on a free of charge basis. The description by Mark Harris of CEP as Harley's supply chain partner, is that something you would agree with? Were you their supply chain partner in that sense?
We supplied to them, and in this instance, we would probably have been a supply partner. I think that's a little bit of over-egging the pudding, but yes, we were a supply chain company to them.
Yeah, and was the reason the CEP did the mock-up for free was because you were expecting, or at least hoping, that CEP would be chosen for the fabrication for the project?
Yes, and probably wouldn't have paid for it anyway. They would have wanted it free. That's the nature of the business.
No, I understand. Can I go then, in light of the nature of the business, to an email chain from the same period, This is CEP 505371. And at page 2, we can see an email from Simon Lawrence to Bruce Soanes and Mark Harris, copy to Ray Bailey. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
wouldn't have seen that at that moment. And if we look at the 4th bullet point down, Mr. Lawrence says, that's Mark Harris, to contact Raynabond about timescales to get materials for mock-up, natural aluminium brushed H9103S and champagne metallic E1101S. Then if we look at the bottom of page 1, we can see what happens to this email chain. You can see that Mark Harris sends that email on to Deborah French on the same day, half an hour later, and it's copied to you. Mm-hmm. You see that?
Yeah.
Deb, Geof, to keep you in the loop. This will be no problem for CEP. They have very little on at the moment. Ha ha! Exclamation marks. And then going up the chain, you can see that Deborah French responds on the 9th of June to Mark Harris, copy to you. Mark, you're cruel. Smiley face. I will bring the smelling salts round, Geof! Exclamation marks. And then you respond the same day, a few minutes later, to Deborah French and Mark Harris, saying, nothing's too much for us at the moment. We just keep fabricating rain screen and glazing and then send it out with whichever project was last spoke about. Lol. Mark, all I can say is you'll be taken out for a very nice meal very soon, somewhere very nice. Now, I've shown you all of that. Were you expressing gratitude in this email for your involvement in the project?
Not particularly. It was a turn of phrase that I think is used. And I think it was just meant tongue-in-cheek that what it says, you may get something. I don't think it's meant to be the way it is being presented.
Well, it says what it says.
Yes.
And I'm just asking you, were you expressing gratitude to Mark
I
Harris
was probably
for
thanking
involving
him
you
for
in the project?
giving us the opportunity to quote them, yes.
Yeah. And is that because you felt Harley had done you a favour by pushing the Grenfell Tower project your way?
I wouldn't have said they'd done us a favour, but they certainly give us the opportunity of the business.
Yeah. Can we turn on then in the story? Is it right that from June 2014, at the latest, the only cladding being discussed, so far as you were aware, was Raynabond PE ACM?
On Grenfell?
On Grenfell, yes.
Yes.
Yes. And if we go into August 2014, CEP 60443, please. This is an email chain that starts at the end of July. If we look at the second email down on that page, Mark Harris sends an email to you, copy to Deborah French, 31st of July. Geof, Deb, copy for your interest. And below that, you can see that Simon Lawrence was telling Harley that, in the third line, the client has just confirmed to planning that they are looking to proceed with Raynabond champagne colour, as shown on the mock-up for the main body of the building, and the cladding will be the cassette fixing version. So you all sent that. And if we then go to the top of the page, we can see that the next day, 1st of August 2014, Deborah French responds to Mark Harris and you. Hi, Mark, it's getting exciting. Thank you for your hard work and perseverance in putting Raynabond forward. I think I owe you and Geof either lunch or dinner at some point. Debs. Now, presumably, is this right, that Deborah French was also very grateful to Mark Harris and to you for involvement in the project?
I would think that's a question for Deborah French to answer.
Okay. Was it your understanding, receiving this email from Deborah French, that she was grateful to you, given that you were one of the invitees to the lunch or dinner that she was proposing?
All I can say is that the three companies acted very professionally, and I never got took out for lunch by anybody. I take it from that Debbie French was thankful that Rena Bond had got some work out of a project in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, you may or may not have got your lunch,
I didn't.
Mr.
There's
Blades. But the
I
point
didn't.
is, she was grateful to you, for your role in putting Rena Bond forward.
It would appear so, yes.
Yes. Can we then look at your second statement, paragraph 62? This is CEP 3064247, page 13, paragraph 62. You say there, no, we looked at this before, no, I did not put Rena Bond forward. In the light of this email that we've just been looking at, it wasn't only Mark Harris who was putting Rena Bond forward, it was you as well. Hence Debbie French's gratitude to you and the offer of lunch or dinner.
I would say so, yes.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, we're going to turn to a different topic, a slightly longer one, which will take me well beyond the next 10 minutes and a break. I don't know whether
Would you rather break at this point?
Well, it might be sensible. It depends on how long that topic takes. It might take 15 minutes, it might take 5, it depends, but I'd rather not take the chance.
All right, well, we'll have a break there then, if you like.
Well, I'm happy to continue, but we could...
Well, it's
It's a bit early, isn't it?
quite early, yes.
All right.
See if you
Okay,
can do
we'll
it in
press on.
5 rather than 15.
All right. I'll take the risk. I want to ask you about the BBA certificate.
Sorry, I should have asked you, you happy to carry on for another 10 or 15 minutes before we have a break?
5 minutes with yourself, sir. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. We both think 5 minutes.
Well, let's see. May not be. We've talked about the BBA certificate, or talked around the subject. I'd like to talk about it in particular. Can we start with CEP 60281, please? This is an email of the 23rd of April 2014 from Debbie French to Mark Harris.
Yes.
And you can see it there, and you are copied in on it, as is Mike Albiston at Harley. And attached to that are a series of documents, the first of which is the BBA certificate, 084510, as a PDF. Do you see that?
Yes.
That email followed, as you can see just below it, a request by Harley, which I don't need to show you. I want to show you the certificate. That's at CEP 60282, please. Now, before the 23rd of April 2014, Mr. Blades, had you seen this certificate?
I will have done, yes.
You would have done. How often would you have seen it, do you think, or looked at it?
Once, maybe twice.
We can see that it was issued in January 2008, if you look at the large blue box towards the bottom of the page. Do you remember when you first looked at it, of the once or twice?
No, I don't recall.
Did you look at it when it was first issued?
I can't say I don't recall.
Do you recall a grand discussion about this certificate, particularly involving Ray Bailey at Harley?
No.
In general terms?
No.
Ever?
I don't recall one.
Right. You say you'd seen it once or twice. Were you familiar with it? Were you familiar with its terms?
I hadn't read it in great depth, to be honest.
Right. When you received it from Debbie French on the 23rd of April 2014, did you read it again?
No.
You didn't? Did you open the attachment even?
Possibly. It was obviously a request for documents. I think you came from Ryden's to Harley's and Harley's to Arconic.
Right.
So I was being copied in, and I took it. I would have taken it as it was something that was being asked for Ryden's files.
Do you know whether CEP had ever had any input into the technical content of this BBA certification?
No.
Were you or anybody else, to your knowledge, at CEP aware of any testing that supported the claims in this certificate?
No.
Do you know, or what did you understand at the time the BBA certificate covered?
It covered various aspects, fixing, colour of the product.
Let me be more specific. Did you understand that it covered the sheet, the Rainabond ACM sheet that came to your factory for fabrication? Or did it cover the product as fabricated as it left your factory, or both?
It would have. We would have taken as it covered the product as it came into the factory in a sheet, in a 4mm sheet, and it would also still cover the products as it left the factory.
Were you ever concerned that the fabrication process itself might undermine the certification by the BBA of the sheet as it left the Rainabond factory?
No.
No. Can I ask you to look, please, at CEP 53378? This is a document published by Rainabond called A Fabrication Guideline Step by Step to a Perfect Cladding, dedicated to your success. And it's dated, you can't see it here, but it's dated the 19th of July 2010. Are you familiar with this document?
I don't believe I am. It doesn't spring to my mind.
Can you explain why that is?
No.
You are CEP, for present purposes, a fabricator of these panels. Is this not a document that was familiar to you?
Not to me personally.
Do you know whether it was in the CEP office in St Helens and regularly read by those on the shop floor? Even if you weren't
couldn't say.
familiar with it?
I couldn't say.
Right. Well, let's see how we go with it. Can you please go to page 12? This is about machining, and on the right-hand side, it says, preparation for machining, calculation of design dimensions. Closed 90-degree fold, milling cutter with 3mm flat surface. I'll just read this out to you. When milling for a fold, a thickness of 3mm of polyethylene should be left in the bottom of the groove on top of the thickness of the aluminium. See procedure in the milling chapter. For a fold milled with a cutter with a flat surface of 3mm, the fold axis will be in the middle of the milled groove flat. Therefore, 0.8mm from the visible face. This, in the case of a closed 90-degree fold, leads to an oversize of 0.8mm per angle. In practice, we round this off to 1mm for ease of calculation. When making a closed fold with a milling cutter with a 3mm flat surface, the exterior finish dimensions is increased by about 1mm. Now, that's more or less comprehensible to a layman. But just in terms of what it's telling you, is it telling you that you need to cut through one sheet of aluminium and most of the way through the polyethylene core, leaving only about 0.3mm of core remaining?
I believe that is the case here.
Yes.
I wasn't involved in the fabrication side of the business.
No, and I'm asking you really to comment on this document. I
That
suppose.
sounds reasonable in what I've seen and aware of when you fold the panel.
Yes. And did you understand that this exposed all of the inside of the core, the polyethylene in this case, apart from the remaining 0.3mm?
I would have been aware, but I wasn't particularly aware of it because I didn't get involved in that. But seeing this document here now, I can see what you're saying. But I wasn't involved in the factory side of things, so I wouldn't take notice of that.
In general terms, though, were you aware that when a flat sheet was fabricated by cutting into a cassette, portions of the PE core would be exposed?
Yes, I would have been aware of that.
And did it cross your mind that that would present a fire risk or fire hazard?
No.
It didn't. Did you ever query, or did you ever bring to the attention of Studio E or Harley or Ryden or anyone you were dealing with on the Grenfell project the fact that milling a flat sheet and exposing the PE core would present a fire risk?
No.
Can we go to the evidence of Mr. Verla of Arconic? This is MET 30053190 at page 20. And I'd like to look with you, please, at paragraph 68. He says there, on the 7th of November 2013, the CSTB, that's the French testing body, informed Philippe, that's Philippe Vronton, who was a colleague of Mr. Verla's,
Okay.
that the first SBI tests had been completed on the samples sent, and that the rivet sample had indicated behaviour equivalent to a C classification on one sample, and that the test on the cassette sample had been stopped due to a flashover, so the best achievable classification for that variant would be an E, using an ignitability test. Now, just stopping there, it looks from that the cassette fix is significantly more, was significantly more combustible than a rivet fix. Did you know that?
No.
Did anybody at Arconic ever discuss the fire performance differences between a cassette fix of this product and a face fixed or riveted?
No, not to my knowledge.
Did anybody at Arconic ever tell you about the results of the European classification testing done at CSTB on Reynobond ACM
Again, not to
in
my
different
knowledge.
configurations?
No.
No? Do you know that cassette had also failed combustibility tests in 2004?
No.
And did you know that in 2013 it had obtained an E under the Euro classification systems?
No.
Are you surprised to hear any of that?
I am, yes. I'm surprised that they didn't make us aware of it.
What had you done had they made you aware of it?
Well, obviously, we would have acted differently.
What would you have done?
I'm not sure. I can't recall because I don't get involved in the manufacturing side of it. But I'm sure that somebody in CEP would have addressed the situation with Arconic as to how to overcome that problem.
Right. Now, what I'm going to do next is to take a closer look at the certificate and see how much you can tell us about it. But I take on board the fact that you were only vaguely familiar with it. Is that a fair description of your overall
It is,
knowledge?
yes.
So I can probably take it a bit more quickly. With that in
Yeah,
mind, Mr. Chairman,
yes.
that may be a convenient moment.
Yes. I think at that point we shall have
Okay.
a break, Mr. Blades. We'll come back at 20 to 4, please. And while you're out of the room, please don't talk about your evidence or anything to do with it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. 20 to 4, please. Thank you. Would you ask Mr. Blades to come back in, please? All right, Mr. Blades?
Yes, thank you.
Ready to keep going?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Blades, can I then take you back to the BBA certificate for this product, the Rainabond PE55 Rainabond ACM panels, at CEP 60282, please? On the front page, we can see, under key factors assessed, the third entry down, behaviour in relation to fire. And it says, in relation to the building regulations for reaction to fire, the panels may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface in England and Wales and a low-risk material in Scotland, see Section 6. When you first and perhaps second time read this certificate, did you note that? Did you note those words?
Yes, possibly.
And if we can look at page 2 of the certificate, at the top, under the header Building Regulations 2000, as they then were, under requirement B4.1, you see it says the panels are judged to meet the Class 0 requirements. See sections 6.1 to 6.6 of this certificate. You see that?
Yes,
Did you note that at the time?
possibly.
Now, if we go to section 6 of the certificate, we can see under 6.1 and this is at page 5. Under 6.1, this is under the whole heading behaviour in relation to fire. 6.1, a standard sample of the product with a grey/green Duragloss 5000 coating, when tested for reaction to fire, achieved a classification of BS2D0 in accordance with EN 13501 of 2002. A fire retardant sample of the product with a gold-coloured Duragloss finish, when tested for reaction to fire, achieved a classification BS1D0 in accordance with EN 13501 of 2002. And then under 6.2, a fire retardant sample of the product with a metallic grey-green PVDF finish, when tested in accordance with BS 4766, achieved a fire propagation index of 0, and when tested in accordance with BS 4767, achieved a Class 1 surface spread of flame. Now, just pausing there, did you ever read that part of the certificate, do you think?
I don't recall, but I would say I've probably skimmed through it.
Right. In 2014, would you have known or understood what those results meant?
No.
Results? No. Reading this now, can you see that FR has a different result in fire performance from the standard sample?
Yes.
And in fact, it's only the fire retardant sample that was tested in accordance with BS 4766 and 7, not the standard sample.
Yes.
Am I right that you assumed at the time, this is really any time from 2012 to 2015, that all of these panels, all Rainabond panels, the subject of this certificate, were Class 0, whether they were fire retardant or standard?
Yes.
Do you see now that that's not actually what the detail of
I
the
see
certificate?
that now, yes.
Yes. Is that a surprise to you to see that?
Yes.
And now if we go to, well, I should just show you for fairness' sake, section 6.3. As a consequence of section 6.1 and 6.2, the products may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface in relation to the approved document B. Did you understand at the time the basis on which, even though a Class 0 test had not been undertaken in relation to the standard sample, nonetheless, a standard sample could be regarded as having a Class 0 surface?
Yes. My understanding, as I believe CEP's understanding, was that the Rainabond products and ones that we'd used had a Class or fire rating.
At a Class 0 fire rating.
Fire rating, yeah.
But they hadn't been tested to Class 0, but they should be regarded as Class 0.
Right, yeah.
Yes. Is that what you understood?
That's what we understood, yes.
Right. So you understood that they hadn't actually been tested to Class 0?
I wasn't aware they hadn't been tested to it, no.
Right, I follow. Can we then look at section 6.4, just a bit lower down? These performances may not be achieved by other colours of the product, and the designations of a particular colour should be confirmed by, and then England and Wales, test or assessment in accordance with approved document B, Appendix A, Clause 1. It's right, I think, that the BBA certificate, at the time it was supplied in April 2014, it was Renault Bond, Champagne and Smoke Silver that were under consideration.
Yes.
And now they're not colours mentioned anywhere in this certificate, are they?
I can see not, no.
No. Did it occur to you at the time that the colours being considered for the tower, namely Champagne and Smoke Silver, were not covered by this certificate?
No.
Why is that?
I would have taken it, and I'll say that CEP would have taken it, that all the colours would have been covered by the same certificate.
But it tells you in terms that these performances, these are fire classification performances, may not be achieved by other colours of the product, and that designations of colour should be confirmed by a test or assessment under approved document B. Did you not know that?
No.
If you'd read the certificate, you would have known it, wouldn't you?
Yes, but I couldn't imagine that a Renabon would test every colour test every colour. It'd be
Right.
a vast amount of testing to do, plus the fact I believe that them and other ASMs, they can provide specific colours at customer requests. But
So-
the view would have been that the Renabon product in any colour would be in line with this, with the Class O, or the regarded having Class O.
So when you read 6.4, what did you think it meant?
Well, having read it now, the way it reads is that it's only the colours. You'd have to get confirmation that any other colour than what they have highlighted in the BBA would have to be confirmed by Renabond as to their performance.
Yes, you say having read it now, now you're reading what it says, but at the time when you first read this, what did you think it meant?
I don't recall reading it in great depth to pick out that
Right.
point 6.4.
Can I ask you to look at the transcript of Ray Bailey's evidence? He was asked about this exact topic. Day 33, page 45, please. And I'd like to show you lines 10 to 25, and then over onto page 46, down to line 11. At page 45, line 10, he was shown this passage in the certificate, and he is asked at line 10, did you consider whether the finish that was on the product may have made a difference to its classification? Answer, it's strange, it was a question that I asked at the time. Who did you ask? Answer, believe it or not, I can't recall who I asked, whether it was Reynabond Direct or through CEP. And if it was through CEP, it would probably have been Roy Fuster. And the reason for the question was the delamination we were having with the et al. Bond, and it was suggested that the paint on that may have had something to do with the delamination. So when I saw grey-green, I thought, does this only apply to this certificate? And I was told, no, it's not on the certificate, because that's the colour that was tested over the page, and it has to go on there. And does it apply to everything else? Well, yes, otherwise there would be 200 of these certificates, one for each colour that they sell. Question, so that was the answer. You were told it would make no difference. Answer, yes. Who was it who told you that? Answer, I believe that came back through Roy Fuster, although it's a long time, I can't remember who it was, but I think that's the route it came back through. Were you aware of any conversation at any time between Ray Bailey and Roy Fuster, or anybody else at CEP, about Clause 6.4 of the BBA certificate, and it only applying to the particular colours?
No.
Can you comment on Ray Bailey's recollection about such a conversation?
Other than if it was, I'm not aware of him having a conversation with anybody at CEP. Obviously, the name in there isn't my name, so I didn't have a conversation with him. Whether he's had a conversation with Renabond and not Mr. Fuster, I couldn't answer. I don't know.
Did you ever ask to see any test evidence, fire test evidence, for colours of Renabond panels that were being considered, other than those set out in the certificate?
No.
And did you ever have a conversation with anybody about the reason why you needed to obtain particular test evidence for particular colours, other than those set out in the certificate?
No.
Was it your practice at the time, in other words, between 2012 or even before 2012, to use or send out the BBA certificate in relation to colours of panels that you were fabricating, which were not the colours referred to in the BBA certificate?
No.
So you didn't send the BBA certificate?
Only if we were requested it.
Right. Do you remember an occasion when you sent a BBA certificate out in relation to a fabricated panel of a colour different from the colour set out in the certificate?
No, I don't.
You don't. Can we then turn to a different topic, which is the 2015 Renabond order, which you got from Harley? Can we start with CEP 60512, please? This is an email from Mark Stapley, the 25th of February, to you, attaching ACM panel requirements for Grenfell Tower. Hi, Geof. Please find attached our cladding panels requirements for Grenfell Tower. Please can you provide us with your most competitive price and also confirm lead times? Do you know why it took Harley so long to place this order, given that you appear to have secured the project back in June 2014?
I don't know.
Let's look at the attachment. It's CEP 60513. This is Harley's order for your supply. I think we may have got the wrong reference there. Can we go on to page... I'm sorry, it's my fault. CEP 60512, please. CEP 60512. Now we want the attachment for that, which at the moment I'm struggling to find. But do you remember that the specification was Renabond and the finish was smoke silver metallic Duragloss 5000 satin?
I don't recall what the colour was, but if that was on the order, then...
Right. And there was never any specification as to whether it should be PE or FR?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Then let's go to the quotation. On the 6th of March 2015, do you remember that CEP sent quotations with a revised quotation, a final revised quotation, on the 13th of March for the supply of the ACM panels? Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yes. I don't believe I sent the email, but I could stand corrected.
Yes, and by that stage, the request for quotation and the quotation is PE, no reference to FR at all.
Correct.
Yes. And if you go to CEP 60528, you can see that Ben Bailey accepts your quotation. This is the email of the 13th of March, 2015, and he sends an email to Rob Maxwell, Mark Stapley, and you, Neil, as it goes to Neil Wilson at CEP. Neil, please find our purchase order to cover the items below. I'll be sending over a delivery schedule shortly. And you can see the email to which he's responding below that. where Neil Wilson confirms to Mark Stapley, copy to Roy Fuster and you, the revised price for the supply and fabrication of the ACM panels for the above project. And you can see that they're the smoked silver panels as detailed. You see that?
Yes.
Now, it looks as if the price that was quoted there, or confirmed there, is around £300,000. You see that?
Yes.
Did yes. Now let's go to CEP 60528, please. At page 2. And you can see that this had come from Neil Wilson. Do you remember, given now I've shown you the entire email run, whether Mark Stapley had asked for a discount from Neil Wilson?
I don't know.
You don't know. Do you think they got a discount?
I honestly don't know.
Do you remember that the price that CEP had originally quoted, as I think we saw from the 21st of January 2014 letter I showed you earlier to Mike Alberston, was £525,394?
Yes, correct.
Yes,
Not-
but we now see from this email, perhaps we should just go back to the bottom of page 1, that the price CEP ended up charging was about £300,000. You remember that? You can see it.
I can see it, correct, yes.
Can you explain why CEP was prepared to drop its quoted price by over 40%?
The quotation back in January 2014, that for the rain screen, that included, if I remember correctly from earlier, that included insulation, fire barriers, rails. I can't just recall exactly what was in it, but it was a full, what I would have classed as a full system. This price is purely for a fabricated panel.
And when did the spec, the CEP spec, if you like, change between the quotation for the full system, at least including rails and fixings, to simply the supply of the fabricated panels?
When Hawley sent the inquiry through for the request just for the panels.
I see. So March 2015.
Yes.
I see. And in the last paragraph of Mr. Wilson's email, he says, "I will confirm we will supply the remainder of the panels yet to be finalised." What was to be finalised?
I don't know. I'm not aware. It could have been they hadn't designed a certain element of the building.
I see. I was going to ask you, was it design or was it simply quantities?
It could have been either. I
Right.
don't recall what that bit was.
And then turning to the supply itself, it's right, I think, that CEP supplied the cladding under a separate contract from the contract under which it supplies the glazed window elements, didn't it?
I believe it was two separate orders, yes.
Two separate orders. And that was the supply of the rain screen was 2015 and again into 2016 in terms of the purchase and delivery.
Right.
Are you familiar with the dates?
I don't know what was in 2016.
Right. Well, what do you recall of the dates of delivery?
I wasn't particularly involved in the delivery.
You weren't, all right.
So what went out, once the programme started to deliver panels, the programme went out from the factory in line with their delivery requirements. And
I see.
as to what they were, I wasn't involved.
Right. Do you remember that in about April 2015, Arconic advised that the core of the Rainabond ACM cladding would be black as opposed to translucent?
No.
You don't know anything about that?
No.
Right. I see. So I don't need to ask any further questions about that. Well, Mr. Blades, I've covered a lot of ground with you today, and I've come to the end of my questions that I've got prepared for you. It's normally the be a process that I then look back at my notes and see if there are any further questions, or take them from elsewhere outside this room.
Okay.
So we're going to have a break now. I'm going to ask the chairman to break for the moment and come back again shortly.
Okay.
Do you have any idea how long you might need?
Maybe 10 minutes.
Should we say 15?
We'll say 15 for be on the safe side.
I think so.
Very generous.
Well, Mr. Blades, as Mr. Miller has explained, he needs a moment just to check that he's covered all the ground. And there are other people watching very intently who may have questions they want to suggest should be put to you. So we're going to break now until 4:15, and then we'll see whether there are any more questions. I hope not too many.
Thank you.
So you go to the usher, and no talking to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
Okay.
All right?
Understood.
Thank you very much. Right, 4:15 then, please. Okay. Yes, would you ask Mr. Blades to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Blades, we'll see if Mr. Millett has any further questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just the one, Mr. Blades, and it's this. We've gone through a lot of evidence today and a lot of questions and answers about the project and your role in it. Looking back on it now, would you have done anything differently on the project, knowing now what you now know?
Yes, I think the company would and I would as well, yes. I think we'd have looked more deeply into the documents that were made available.
And what documents?
The BBA certificate, and BBA certificate in particular, and probably inquired more as to what other products that was associated with a rain screen system did, and how it affected the panel or not. In that case, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions. Mr. Blades, it only remains for me to say thank you to you for coming to the inquiry today and assisting us with our investigations. We're extremely grateful.
Great, thank you.
Yes, well, again, I'd add my thanks to those of Mr. Millett. It's been very good of you to come to the inquiry. Thank you for doing so. I know it's been quite a long journey for you, hasn't it? Come down.
Yeah.
But at least you're going to be able to get home, I think, without too much difficulty this afternoon.
Fingers crossed, yes.
Fingers crossed. So thank you very much for coming. It's been very helpful to have your evidence, and you're now free to go.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Millett. Now, that presumably is it for the day.
That is it for the day, and tomorrow we have another witness, Mr. McQuat, whom Miss Grange will be examining.
Good. Thank you very much. Well, 10 o'clock tomorrow then, please. Thank you.